true to your word. And while a lot of people will use that as their definition of integrity, it's amazing when you take their definition and you reflect it back to them in a mirror, and all of a sudden they're uncomfortable. And I always say, it's not about making you wrong. It's about giving you an opportunity to see where is the distortion in your integrity. And now you have a choice.
Martians landed,
yes,
wearing Prada suits,
yes,
drinking Henry Seltzer,
yes,
chewing juicy fruit,
yes, and
your branding here,
yes, brand,
your message here,
yes, and
a verse about
yes,
your product here.
yes,
I'm Hersh Redmond.
yes, and
I'm a message therapist.
yes,
And I have a podcast.
yes, brand,
That's right, that's it.
yes,
We'll help you fix the world
yes.
or your bottom line.
All right,
Your bottom line.
get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
I am very excited about this episode of Brand Voice Runway. I am going to be speaking with Michele Price, who is the CEO of Breakthrough Business Strategies, as a multiracial leader. And she will get into her Choctaw, Cherokee, and Celtic background. We're definitely going to experience what Michele describes as a revolutionary indigenous mindset. And I love that. I love that description. And I also love the fact that you envision a world where equity is normal, because that is an area where, human nature would seem to go against itself quite a bit. And when we're trying to brand and build brands, what the brand is on the inside is really, I believe, where it all starts. And so for me, equity, fairness, inclusivity is all part of selling the truth. It's all part of, if we're going to put a true and honest brand together, we're going to need to be fair. And that is a challenge that we're forever facing. Anyway, Michele, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm kind of excited to be here. It's interesting being on the other side of the mic.
Yes.
When you've interviewed people for 10 years, frankly, to me, it's easier being on your side of the mic, but that's just because that's where I feel comfortable.
Yeah, but that's part of it too, is getting out of our comfort zone and moving into the opposite chair. I was more on the guest side for many years and used to being a kind of performer, but really, being the performance person and not the interviewer, not asking the questions. But it's been a few years now, so I've kind of adjusted my persona. But when I am on somebody else's podcast, it's funny because, I'll find myself asking them questions about themselves, and then they're like, they just kind of very delicately weave their way back to asking me questions. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm not interviewing them. Their audience probably knows a lot about them already. Well, okay. Tell the audience, if you would, Michele, how you came to form Breakthrough Business Strategies and what it does.
That has been a 4-decade journey. Yeah. I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years, and there's so many different stages and phases and timelines that happen in our growth as individuals as well as in our businesses. But oftentimes I think people forget that who they are and how they show up has everything to do with what they're able to accomplish in their business. And so when I was thinking about reframing, recalibrating, and relearning what I wanted to do at this phase and stage of my life, I just looked back for the red thread that went through everything that I had accomplished. And I saw a pattern of consistent breakthroughs, whether it was for me, whether it was for the business goals that I was trying to accomplish, or whether it was for clients in each of those different businesses in totally different arenas and industries. I was like, okay, maybe it's time I finally wear that crown and see what else happens.
Yeah. And that's interesting because more and more people are helping others do what they've done for themselves. That's kind of a hallmark of coaching and advising, is that we've been through it ourselves. We somehow figured out the answer. What are some of the things that you've figured out in business and in being an entrepreneur that have led to some of these breakthroughs?
One of the things I have started becoming a lot more comfortable with is discussing how I've had a parallel journey of entrepreneurship with my spiritual journey. Because let's face it, 40 years ago, that was not something you talked about out loud.
No.
And so as we've navigated through time, what I'm finding is the strengths that I'm able to tap into because of my ancestral journey, my spiritual journey, they're showing up really big in the work that I'm doing with clients. Because so many times what I watch and observe is people talk about their framework, their solution. That's great. Except I'm not here to teach a framework or a solution. I'm here to help you actually learn how to tap into what is your inner wisdom. Where is your baseline? Where is your conditioning? Intentional, unintentional, conscious, unconscious, affecting who you are and how you show up. Because I believe when everybody operates from what I call a clean code of their own operating system, that's when we're going to start seeing really innovative solutions surface and be put to use to some of these huge problems that we face in the world right now.
When you're looking at who your ideal client is, because they have to somehow align with, with your view of how you come to these things and all that, what makes an ideal client for you?
I've watched it evolve and grow. So originally, my goal, because being a woman business owner and an entrepreneur 40 years ago was a very lonely journey. There were not a lot of other women in the space to be supportive or collaborative with one another. You took a lot of hits. You had to be able to really go toe to toe with men. And I've watched how that's changed over time for us as a people. I've watched how it's changed for women over time, and I've watched how it's changed for me over time. And so what I thought was my original client from the beginning versus what shows up now are a couple of different things. I've learned the nuance of it's not about listing out a bunch of demographics. It's not even about listing out a lot of different behavioral patterns. It's more about recognizing where in the cycle and where in the timeline my client is. And people who gain the most from working with me are literally on the precipice of the change, the precipice of the breakthrough. And there's something that's still in their way, but they've already done a lot of the work. And what happens is when they have someone who really knows how to create that sacred space of hearing the unheard, all of a sudden we're able to laser in on what is the hurdle for them, and they create their own breakthrough.
Now, are there people who, will draw a very, distinct line between the spiritual part of business and the left brain, if you will, part of the results, the results oriented, the ROI oriented, because they say, listen, I want to 2x my profits. That's what I want to do. And that's the breakthrough I need. And here's what's going on. And they say nothing about, their spiritual side or the alignment. What's your reaction to that, or how do you respond when that happens?
I usually have a lot of questions that surface that I can ask them that really lets me know where they're at. And a lot of times they will share things. They don't even realize that they're sharing a deeper answer in their conditioned or surface answer. So like we talked about at the beginning of the show, I'm able to pick up on a red thread in that answer and continue unraveling it. And all of a sudden they have a new awareness of, okay, so I've tried going at it from this direction. I'm not getting the results I want. What I'm hearing as we're talking is there's a possibility there's something I've not done that you're going to help me recognize. And that's when I know we're going to really make some progress.
And what does progress start to look like in those scenarios?
Usually their language starts shifting. Their questions come from just a slightly different angle. And even as we're talking and we're having that back and forth that happens in conversation or dialogue, I'll notice a physiological change in them. And it's because I can literally sense when someone's all in their head and when they've allowed themselves to drop down into their body and ask their own questions from a different place.
Oh, okay. So, because that is interesting. And as someone who meditates and who has done some, quantum consciousness work and other things, human design I've looked into. So these are things that I'm familiar with. And I feel like as a creative person, as a writer, and as a, interviewer, let's say, who's curious and, and so forth, I have both the ordered kind of personality that likes the directions, and then I have the kind of curious, playful mind that is open to all kinds of things. But I think, and I'm using myself as a kind of a guinea pig, if you will, in this scenario, because I'm fascinated. I want the audience to, before we get into the branding of Michele Price, I want to get into a little bit of what you are offering and what you're doing. When people are close to success, or the success that they want, or that next level of success, what is it that's usually got to be? Is it kind of an insight thing? Is it a bad habit they got to break, or a mindset thing?
Well, of course, it's individual to each person because, their journey and what they came in with, and then what they either learn or stack on top of what they're learning influences and affects that. But I find oftentimes what happens is people don't recognize the power of when you're able to move from intellectual to emotional to physical sensation. When you've learned how to dance between those pieces of you, then that's what actually activates flow. And when flow is activated, you have access to knowledge about yourself, as well as knowledge that's just sitting there waiting for someone to tap into it in the universe. It's like Albert Einstein said, there's nothing about me that's special. I was just willing to listen enough.
Yeah, very, very good point. Because I think, a lot of it is our willingness to open our minds and let stuff flow, as opposed to trying to force things and kind of force results or conclusions. And now talk a little bit about neurodivergence and the role that plays.
Oh, so holding my hand up, it's been less than 2 years that I've consciously understood how my where all I have neurodivergence.
Okay. Yeah.
And so part of that journey is being willing to consistently review and unravel where I grew up, as well as where I was an adult, masking some of those things and what it means to not do that, so that I'm in flow with my strengths from a really different perspective. One thing that people don't understand if they're not neurodivergent is they tend to think everybody is just doing things on purpose.
Uh-huh.
And what happens is when you've had to cover up for something that's not easily understood by the general public, it means you're not bringing your full self. It also means that is literally a form of resistance to who you are, which we already know can wear us out. And so when you're not doing that any longer, when you're giving yourself permission to go, in the past, what I've done is this. Now that I have a new lens on my nervous system and how I interact with the world, God, it feels a lot better for me not to have to constantly adjust to everybody else's temperature.
Mm-hmm.
I also find one of the interesting things that makes it fun for me as someone who's been a professional communicator for a long time is because of that creative future thinking part of me, I've started to learn how to front load conversations with people so that it brings it to the surface, gives them a learning opportunity, and it paves the path for me so that I don't have to mask in situations where I did in the past.
Yeah, I think that's similar to a conversation that I had yesterday where we were talking about sales. And what's the psychology of sales? How do people respond to this being in a sales driven situation? And sometimes there's a lot of masking that has to go on, where people feel that masking has to go on because the selling part seems bad seems like it's got this baggage or it's got this. But and my suggestion was to use humor and say, well, if you can pop that balloon right up front with some kind of disarming comment, you can call attention to that elephant in the room right away, and then just continue the rest of the conversation with that in the air. You make a joke about it. My joke was, I said, when you're on the phone with a prospective client and it's a coaching situation or a program they're going to sign up for, and then you would say, what card would you like to put that on? And if you say that like right up front in the first 2 minutes of the conversation, what card would you like to put that on? Then they feel like, oh, okay, he's being funny, but he obviously had, this is a sales we're going to talk about business or we're going to talk about work, but it diffuses the tension, I think. And so I feel like that would let somebody be their authentic self once you take when the tension could be over anything. But I mean, that's always been my MO, is like in the beginning of a conversation, just get the tension out of the way, because it's going to, build, and it's going to distract, and it's going to make for a kind of a wasted opportunity.
And it gives you an opportunity to actually model what you're good at.
Yeah. I think so. And now I had put out I had asked you for some of your core values. I had said before the show, what are some core values? And you had integrity, freedom, and equity. And we mentioned equity in the beginning. Integrity and freedom. Talk about those.
Freedom. One of the things that I'm finding fascinating as I'm going through life is observing and watching where people and myself have warped definitions of words. And so one of the things that my energy is really different than others is I talk about what's the meaning of that word to you. So the meaning of the word to freedom to me is I literally can do what I feel or sense or want is important in that moment, that phase, that cycle, that time of life, whether it's a decision I'm making right here that affects this very moment, or a decision I'm making that's going to affect the next 5 to 10 years. I'm shocked sometimes, it shouldn't be, because I've been around a long time, seen a lot. It shouldn't shock me, but I'm still shocked how often people don't give themselves permission to have freedom.
Mm-hmm.
They stay so constrained with all the things they've told that they should be or should do, This is the definition of a good man. This is the definition of a good husband. This is the definition of a good woman. This is the definition of a good mother. And I'm like going, what does it mean to you though? And what does it feel like to you? And does that feel satisfying in your body? Because when it doesn't, that's data. That data will continue to surface and prod you until it gets your attention. So give it your attention, learn with it and from it, learn how to be in relationship with it. You're actually going to start achieving some of the things that you'd like to have. So freedom to me, God, that's everything. Integrity, being true to your word. And while a lot of people will use that as their definition of integrity, it's amazing when you take their definition and you reflect it back to them in a mirror, and all of a sudden they're uncomfortable. And I always say, it's not about making you wrong. It's about giving you an opportunity to see where is the distortion in your integrity. And now you have a choice. Are you going to live with that distortion? Or are you going to figure out what you need to clean up so you are actually integrity with yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, that's the first step. I tell that to clients too all the time is, this is kind of something that you got to do from the inside out. You got to know who you are first. You don't have to kind of twist yourself into a million pretzel pieces to try to appeal to a client and think what they want you to be. Figure out who you are and who you want to be and who you aren't yet, and just work on that. That's going to benefit your eventual audience or your current audience. Speaking of which, now breakthrough business strategies obviously puts an emphasis on business. A lot of what we've been talking about has kind of a life coach, personal development feel to it, but it's clearly in the service of business goals. How have you gone about presenting yourself so that people understand your brand?
One of the things that I've noticed that's been really helpful for people is when I start sharing the different types of roles I've had over that time span and who each one of those roles has allowed me to be and what I've learned about myself and how I've changed my choices and my decision-making skills in business. Because oftentimes, most people are still in a place where they have pretty set definitions of what that looks like. And until, kind of like what we've done earlier today, until they start seeing how that growth, that evolution can look like, they're so stuck in where they are right now. Sometimes they haven't reflected back on, where did I start from and what are the different things I learned about myself to get where I am today? I find people, amazingly enough, don't look at some of the mountains they've climbed.
Yeah.
And have a healthy respect for what it took to get there. That is fabulous fuel to help you with what you're trying to accomplish in business now. So it is a parallel journey where sometimes, as in Ghostbusters, the streams cross, and they talked about like that was a bad thing. But when I watched that movie, I'm like, watch it. When the streams cross, breakthroughs happen. That's good stuff.
Yeah. And now when you're exploring the growth of your business, of your practice, everybody has a different idea of their fully realized business, right? For you, what is the next goal, the next challenge? And is there something that's been a little bit of a struggle in getting to that next level?
Because as people, we've gone through so much significant change in a short period of time. while I'm uniquely positioned to help facilitate that, it's thrown the timetable of what we tend to expect for our businesses, what it could look like, what that growth could look like. It's kind of thrown a lot of puzzle pieces on the table now. And so what I've started doing, instead of saying, I want my business to look like this, I've started to learn to be more flexible and curious and go, what else could my business look like that I've not seen before? And how would that facilitate the change that feels satisfying to me as well as serve the world?
That's interesting because outcomes are, something we try to, and sometimes in business ascribe to reports and data and all kinds of other, well, what are the possible outcomes? And really we usually want one outcome of some kind. And if we focus on only that, we're much more likely to be disappointed by any alternate outcome, right? But if we focus way ahead on the bigger goal, on the larger goal, and is this in some way serving that larger goal, we might appreciate it, right? So it seems like, your advice in certain cases to your clients would be to have that full view, that long view, and be a little more open to the possible outcomes, the various outcomes. Is that right?
Yeah, because that's also where breakthroughs happen.
Yeah.
That means we've actually stretched the space in ourselves and allowed it to break.
Now, how big a breakthrough, and that's relative, of course, to a client, but are there some breakthroughs that you found particularly interesting in the work that you do?
When I access my memory banks on that of recent past and past,
yeah,
deeper past, what I find is multiple memories pop up that are almost like siblings.
I get it. Yeah.
And so the thing that I find most satisfying is when people recognize something in themselves that has always been there, but it's been dormant and it's not been activated.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, a common thing that they'll reply to me is, oh my God, I've always known that, but I've not done anything with it yet.
Yeah. And sometimes people go through quite an amount of time without doing that. And then what happens? So when there's been those kinds of aha moments, how do you shepherd them through that?
I find I don't have to do a lot of shepherding at that point, because then all of a sudden what happens is just activating that, their mind kind of starts turning to popcorn and they start thinking about all these kind of possibilities that could potentially surface for that. That's usually when I find what happens is allowing them to let all the bubbles of that champagne come to the surface. And then we put together some really great questions that helps to guide them for, how is this aligned with what I'm trying to accomplish now? Or is this something that I can set aside because it projects me too far into the future, but I still have access to it when I need to tap into it? I find helping people use their questions in a way that helps them navigate immediacy, coming future, way out future, are usually where they're able to make better decisions, feel better about those decisions, and then actually execute on those decisions instead of having them sit there kind of like that dormant talent, whatever was dormant strength in them that wasn't used before.
Yeah. And then finally, just to kind of come back around to the brand and the next stage, what are you either excited about or taking on in the next phase of breakthrough business strategies?
This one's fun and funny.
Okay.
Because I actually joked about it a year ago when I was recalibrating and refining my ideal client avatar. And I said to a colleague, oh, how funny is it going to be as I'm navigating this space with these women that I want to work with, if who ends up raising their hand are men who are allies and they want to do the work too.
Uh-huh.
And funnily enough, this year, a hand raised, and then another hand raised, and then another hand raised. And I'm like going, oh, so the timing is now, eh?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so did you end up working with some men?
Not only that, but what's happening, because of my brain is just kind of like that. Now I'm starting to see all kind of different possibilities of what that looks like for them, as well as what it looks like for me, and how that's going to help progress the vision of the company. And so, yeah, I'm kind of like a kid in a candy shop right now.
And how does that look when a man comes as an ally, but obviously they're also trying to proceed and have some breakthrough of their own? What are they facing and what are they trying to resolve in a more of a general sense?
They're usually discovering and learning about themselves where they thought they had facilitated change, but they're also seeing where they have not progressed as far as they thought they were.
Oh,
they're seeing, oh God, I thought I was more inclusive, and I'm starting to hear myself differently. I'm starting to hear how my words have bias in them that I missed before. I'm starting to see where my decisions had conditioning attached to it that I thought I had addressed. And oh gosh, there's a layer I totally missed. So when they come to me, they're kind of like, I thought I knew myself, and all of a sudden it's kind of like being in a first love relationship. I'm discovering new things about myself, and I'm going, wait a minute, that's not who I said I wanted to be. What's going on here?
And then the popcorn starts, and now they're having all kinds of ideas about who they want to be. Well, this has been fascinating, Michele. I really appreciate your coming on. Tell my audience how they can find you.
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn. Michele with a 1L, Price. My mother had something funny she taught me, because people always tried to tell me I was misspelling my own name.
Yeah.
She said, daughter, all you have to do is let them know there is no hell in my daughter's name. And as soon as people hear that and they hear me delivered in my mother's voice, they never forget it.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then
subscribe and leave a
yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?